Hi guys. What I like to do for exams is make sure I give you guys a video where I can kind of walk you through what the important things are in the chapter that you're going to need to kind of pull out or make sure that you know before going into the exam. It just helps you guys kind of know what to expect, but then also it's easier for you to prepare because then maybe you can take your notes ahead of time or make sure you have those things in front of you going into the exam so you're not flipping around as much and things like that. So you guys are doing chapters 1 through 4 on the exam. It'll open up Friday morning and be open up until Sunday night at midnight. I put in the directions, but here's some main key points. You'll have 2 hours to do it. You cannot start it and then go back. So you have to, once you sit down to do it, you have to do it. Once you pass a question, you won't be able to go back. And you can use your notes, you can use your book, any of that stuff. The only thing you can't do is use the internet, so you can't copy and paste from the internet, and you can't use other people. So I do certain things to check for those. You know, we look at times that you've logged in, we looked at the computer that you logged in on, we look at if there are similar missed questions, things like that, to try to keep it as academically sound as possible. So make sure that you have your book and you have your notes and you can print off the PowerPoints. There's no reason for you to cheat off of somebody else and get a 0 on the exam, which usually typically would equate to you failing the class because it's very hard to recover from that. So keep that in mind going in. You should have plenty of time. There's 27 questions. So it's not a lot of questions, but you're going to have to do some writing on quite a few of them. And I don't mean writing like an essay. I mean writing like list this or give me a couple examples of this. And so I'm going to kind of walk you guys through that right now so you really understand what you're looking at. So in chapter 1, it's all about health. And the big components that you're going to want to focus on is obviously you need to know what the dimensions of health are and be able to talk about those a little bit. Okay, and then it just kind of gets into some details about health. So you have where it talks about health in America, discussing some of those statistics, but important parts of that is knowing kind of like what we mandate as a society or what our goals are, I guess you would say, as a society. So knowing a little bit about the Healthy People 2020, what are those big components that they've broken it down into, things like the first one they list there, eliminate preventable disease, disability, injury, and premature death. So that's one of their big main components. And then if you look underneath there, they also have some major key components that they've added in that are more specific. So the first one they list there is nutrition and weight status. Prevent inappropriate weight gain in youths and adults. So that's another component of that. So you want to make sure you know some of those. What I always tell students is if you don't want to flip back and forth in the book, when I'm telling you something is important, I would write those things down on a separate piece of paper and have them in front of you, add them to your slides, find them on your slides if they're on there. So that you have this stuff in front of you when you go to take the exam, and then you don't have to worry about flipping back to your online book and then back to the exam. Then basically what you're going to do is have to discuss some of the components that they talk about. So race. What are some big issues in regards to health and race? And there's a ton in your book. And I'm not going to make you list them all, but you need to make sure you know some of the issues with race. Okay, then it talks about some of the issues with gender. And then it talks about specifically college health. And obviously that's really important because you guys are all college students. So you're going to look a little bit into some of that campus health, some of those campus health issues. You will also, in this chapter and every chapter, have the first like 4 questions are just vocab and it's matching, and each chapter has its own matching. So you'll have a chapter 1 matching, a chapter 2 matching, chapter 3 matching, chapter 4 matching. So the other thing I tell students a lot of times is with the vocab, I would either write those out on a piece of paper so you have all the vocab together. Or if you want to like go to the back and take pictures of the glossary or something like that. But usually I say if you write them out and keep them in front of you, or if they are already in the slides, highlight them and then just add any that aren't in the slides. So that you have all definitions in front of you. That matching should go pretty quickly also, okay? Also in chapter 1, let's see, after the college stuff, you're going to have to talk a little bit about the trans-theoretical model, like knowing those stages, knowing some of the processes of change that they talk about, and being able to discuss that a little bit. So that's really it in chapter 1, okay? In chapter 2, you start to get into psychological and spiritual well-being. And really, this one's going to be a little bit more general. These are going to be some more of your kind of essay-style questions. You're going to have to be able to discuss what are some of the lessons of positive psychology. And your book is set up really nice because it really dictates easily with headings. So like when you look into your lessons of positive psychology life, you're going to see little headings like boost self-esteem, develop self-compassion. There's a whole bunch of them. Boost emotional intelligence, meet your needs, pursue happiness. And those are all examples that fall into what are we doing with positive psychology. And if you don't really understand what they're talking about, positive psychology is really just more of a focus on what do we do for people that makes them happy and makes them successful so that they don't end up with a mental health disorder. Because a lot of times what we've done in the past when we look at psychology is we look at the problem and we try to fix it. And what we've decided recently in psychology is that wouldn't it be better if we could just prevent it from happening in the first place? So they've done a lot of studies to see what kind of things people who are happy do. And if we can get other people to do those things, then hopefully they won't ever develop those mental illnesses. So things like optimism and the characteristics of resilience and those things. So you're going to have to talk some about the positive psychology. Let's see. Then you're going to talk a little bit about spiritual health. So what are some of the components of that? What are some things that people can do to increase their spiritual health? And then another big component is sleep. And so making sure you can discuss why do we need sleep. There's a lot of reasons listed, being able to discuss some of those, knowing what happens when we don't get enough sleep. Specifically, if you can throw in statistics about college students, because obviously, again, that's what a lot of you guys are. That's what all of you guys are. Even if you're non-traditional, you're still a college student. So all of those things, how does sleep affect us? And most importantly, what are going to be the impacts of sleep on our health? Okay. And that's really it for that chapter. Okay, so just some big broad components you're going to look at there and be able to talk a little bit about. In chapter 3, you get into the actual mental health disorders. And one of the first things that you're going to have to talk about is mental health disorders. And you're going to have to pick a couple and give me a lot of information or as much information as you can about those particular disorders. I'm not going to make you discuss every single one because it's a lot of information. But I would make sure that you can fully discuss a few of them. Okay. A lot of disorders, so that's a big chunk of it. And then towards the end, you're going to discuss suicide a little bit. What are some of the risk factors? What are some things we can do to prevent it? Those types of things. Again, you can relate it to college campuses because your book does a really good job of specifically pointing out those components of college. And then you're going to have to talk a little bit about actually, I think that's it for that chapter 2. And then chapter 4, get into stress. And a big component of what you're going to have to discuss here is stress specific to students. Okay, so kind of just in general, how does it affect student health? But you're also going to have to kind of go into each little category. So making sure you can say something about students specifically under the age of 25, about minority students, about entering freshmen, about test stress. Okay, so they give you some different ages, and you have to be able to talk about those. And then, let's see, discussing some of the physical impacts of health on your body. So specifically, again, there's some categories I want you to make sure you address. Make sure you address the heart, the immune system, the gastrointestinal system, and cancer, and knowing how stress can impact those. And then basically some ideas about how to manage stress. So what are some good things that we can do? What are some positive ways to manage stress? Obviously, we know a lot of people choose negative ways to manage stress, like overeating or drinking or doing drugs or going out and spending a bunch of money. All of those are not really appropriate coping mechanisms. So be able to discuss what are some of the positive ways to manage stress. What are some things that seem to work? How can we prevent stressing ourselves out as much? So things like time management and scheduling and not procrastinating, some of those concepts, and just be able to discuss that a little bit. And then that's it. So like I said, it's 27 questions. The first 4 are going to be all matching. So again, your chapter 1 matching, chapter 2 matching, chapter 3 matching, chapter 4 matching. And then you'll go into, there is some true and false, couple true false, couple multiple choice. And then really you just get into these, hey, list some of these components and describe 2 of them. Or discuss at least 3 of these components about stress. Okay, and that's really what the rest of the test is. And then you'll see at the end, which is what I usually do, your last question is just going to relate back to what you guys have been doing on your own in regards to your surveys and discussing what you found out and how to apply that in your life and what kind of changes should you make or could you make and how are you going to implement those changes. So if you have any questions before you start the test, just make sure you remind at me or send me an email. But like I said, it's going to open Friday morning, and you'll have until Sunday night to do it. But I'm posting this today, which is Wednesday, so that gives you a couple days to kind of take what I'm telling you and set yourself up to be prepared to take the test.